Hi everyone, this is Karanjot Singh and thanks for tuning in to the FinTech Alchemist. So this is my first video and I would like to take 2 minutes just to describe the direction I'm going with this channel, what I've been thinking about. Although I covered a little part of it in the first video, the why, it was a very informal video, straight from the heart. So you can check it out. But now I'll talk about the series. The next few videos that I've planned are a part of a similar group and I like to call it the build series. So why is this series important and why do I feel like I'm spending the time to record these videos here is uh, given my background, I come from a computer science background. I recently graduated, right? And I understand that there's a lot of opinions around regarding building for India or uh, a lot of confusion in a lot of people that I see in my age bracket regarding what they should do. There's this conception that deep tech is only happening in the Bay Area and in the Silicon Valley, and that's why a lot of people flock there. But at the same time, there's a lot of reverse brain drain that's also happening nowadays. A lot of people are trying to come back to India, and they feel that India is the place to be right now. So I like to lean towards the second ideology for some reasons. And this is exactly why I feel that, there's this incentive to building that there should be. So I, not to be more dramatic, very dramatic, but I do feel like there is uh, a latent state of India where, the golden age can be unlocked. And it's not a given, we have to unlock it, right? There's a lot of good initiatives going on regarding some policy decisions lately with the India stack, and I feel like that could unlock a lot of value. And given the size of our nation, it can be a great step to creating an entirely new market. So I feel like people who come from the tech background especially, but it applies for others as well, that we've been taught an education system, we know how to follow the rules, we don't know how to break them per se, and which is kind of a little important when you are creating disruptive products, which is why the Bay Area is famous, right? uh, if you look up and read history behind it, the reason that they succeed so much is because of disruption and innovation. So this build series that I've planned out is a series of videos where I am trying to research on a particular topic, and I tell you how can you take the first step towards building something or contributing to the ecosystem or what's going on lately, right? So that's the agenda of the build series. This particular video will be the first step towards how do you go about building something. So everything that I do on this channel is planned to be a very scientific and with a rational kind of like a step program. It's organized, right? The idea that startups or building cannot be done in a linear fashion, or rather than linear fashion in an organized way, is somewhat is a misconception. So essentially, the idea of the build series is that I want people who see this video to take up the helm of building, who currently feel lost. That okay, I am so and so person, I have XYZ skills, but I don't know how to take the first step, right? So hopefully, this nudges you. This is like a nudge to send you in the right direction, and maybe we unlock a whole ecosystem with this. And I see that this is an active effort. Like a lot of entrepreneurs have been trying to do that with great podcasts like Nikhil Kamat's podcast, and then there is the Barbershop podcast. So there's this influx with, Shark Tank India. There's the stigma around entrepreneurship is reducing, but we still need organized builders, which is more work than hype, right? So that's in a nutshell the agenda of this video. And this a few series that are going to follow, and I'll label them all according to the build series, right? Another note is I've been trying to build this channel also in a similar fashion. So essentially, I'm following what I preach. So I'm trying to follow the lean model to build this channel itself. So a footnote about this video is that this is a re-recording. For some reasons, I lost the audio, a particular section, audio for the particular section. So I have to re-record this video and hence you might find some glitches in the audio here and there. I'll be stitching some components, so I apologize for that. Bear with me and follow suit for the other videos. I'm sure that the quality will get better. At the same time, as I mentioned, I'm following the lean model with this YouTube channel as well. I'm experimenting. The next three videos that I planned will be very different, and they are kind of like experiments or hypotheses. And we'll just see what works, what is a better way that I can engage with you folks. And yeah, we'll just see what works, right? So that's about it. And now I think we are ready to dive into the topic about how not to start up. And yeah, let's dive right in. All right, so let's get started. So, as I mentioned, today's video is about talking about startup pitfalls. What are the common mistakes that people make, and how not to start up. So, the way I approach this is we'll use the latest technology, and I logged on to Perplexity and asked about it, right? So, here's a quick summary of what we are about to see in this video. We'll talk about a few common startup pitfalls, according to Steve Blank. We'll get to know him soon. And just to give you a quick summary, in case I don't have your attention span yet, so I'll give you a quick summary of what I'm going to talk about, and then I might dive into one by one topic into I might dive into it deeper, right? So the first one, right, is failing to engage with the right stakeholders, as you can see on the screen. And this is essential because a lot of people like me, like people similar to my background, engineers, we come from this hackathon effect that I like to call it, and we look at the product first, and we don't test the waters or check the market, right? That's a problem. Briefly going on to the second point, we assume we know what the customer wants. We think that what we want is what the customer wants. But I encourage you to look beyond a nutshell, right? Uh, just try walking on the street and you'll see so many different tiers of India at the same time, right? So uh, you could never assume what the customer wants or what what is their needs, right? It's a proper process that you need to follow to understand that, and that is something that a lot of people miss out on. They have this personal bias that comes in the way that you got to build on it, and you have this problem, so hundreds might have it too. So you need to avoid that. The third is focus on execution and delivering a product based on untested hypotheses, right? Sounds like a lot, but essentially it is for a startup or for an early stage company or even an early stage product or a project that you want to scale up, right? Then the focus is not more on implementing it or making sure that it's right as per the technical specifications, but it's more regarding learnings as to what you don't know about the market and what you don't know about people who want to use the product, right? Uh, the fourth point is, hiring executives and starting. The first thing that you do is build a thing and then start marketing it, doing sales, instead of listening to customers and understanding their needs. Now, the caveat here is this is not a linear model, and it is something that you'll have to do it in a loop. So when you start thinking that you know the customer, that's when you know you don't know the customer, right? So never fall into this pitfall that you fully know what the customer's workflow is. It's always incremental. You'll find that okay, the customer asked for say XYZ, you implemented that. It turns out now they have another problem in their workflow, right? So it's a very iterative uh, process, right? Startups actually in some way are not as as enticing as they might sound, right? A lot of it has groundwork behind it, right? A lot of efforts back and forth with the customers trying to understand what they exactly want. A lot of times customers don't even know how to put what they exactly want, right? So that's where the finesse comes in, or that's where a good entrepreneur can be differentiated from the others. Then we talk about the greatest risk in a startup is not developing a product. It is developing customers, finding the right customer who's ready to pay you for your product, right? And you can make money with it, like deduct the expenses, salaries, etc. Now we're talking the large scale of things, like the farther end of the equation. But yeah, like think via the first principles. Uh, it's not that every successful company that we see around has the best product. We often see people offering, let's just say, technically poorer products at higher price points, and sometimes people might be puzzled. Oh, why do people invest in Apple products, for example? They are so expensive, right? uh, there is a story behind it, and you know I like to believe that Apple has unlocked a particular kind of customer segment, and they know exactly what they want, right? Similarly, you might argue that, okay, nothing is so good. Taking the example of smartphones, like they are giving the bang for the buck. Even they have a different customer segment. But both of these have a good idea of who their customer is. And when you start a new startup, probably you don't, right? So good amount of effort should not be in building the product, but it is more about understanding who is that customer or who is that customer segment for you, right? So now we'll talk about some problems of the traditional product development model. And I think since we've not been over this, I'll now switch out to a more comprehensive resource. And the resource that I'll be using, I'll link it down in the description. It's Steve Blank's blogs. And yeah, this is a deeper, um, this is now we're going into a deeper dive of the video. And if you feel like you engaged quite well with this and you got the concept, you can feel free and skip the rest of the video. If not, I encourage you to stay and maybe find something new that you might learn. So now I moved on to the Steve Blank's blog, blog post, and as you can see, it's a quite old post, but it's 2009, right? Why are we still talking about it, or why am I referring to it? So Steve Blank uh, wrote a few books, and he came up with this customer development model, which is the baseline or the inspiration behind the lean startup model as well, which I will also talk about in a future video. So even though this is pretty old, I feel that this has stood the test of time, and it tells you about, you know, why is this so important. So let's dive into it. First, we are going to talk about the leading cause of startup death, right? So first, we introduce ourselves to the product development model. So what is that? And why does this come up, right? This is something that was adopted after, say, the industrial revolution, right? Industry starting to grow, and you have famous people like the assembly line developed by Ford, right? So structure started coming into how do you scale and how do you reach markets that were earlier thought inaccessible. So think before 1900s or 1800s, before the industrial revolution, you didn't really have a way apart from the local economies, right? You sell to the person who you can see. It's more about, oh, you can see him, then you can sell to them, right? And you could only produce an X amount. There was a limit on what you could produce. But with industrial revolution, machines came up, and then you could suddenly automate a lot of tasks, so you could produce a lot more. When you can produce a lot more, you can sell a lot more. With internet coming in, the selling part or the discovering of customers became easier, right? So but that's true for everybody, so the competition also increased. So that's the context behind this. And essentially, companies after the 20th century, right, in the earlier 20th century, they started developing this product development model, which is similar to an assembly line, right? And this works really well. The model works amazing for companies that know that they have an existing well-defined market, right? This is a great fit for those. When you understand the competition, when you know who your customer is, right, it is a good model to just ship products fast as possible and make revenue. But for startups, the irony is that not a lot of startups fit into this criteria. The whole idea behind a startup is a kind of disruption, or doing better. So you don't really know who is the correct person to adopt your product. Right. So briefly talking about what this product development model was, which is not recommended, is first you come up, it's a seed stage where you come up with a concept and a vision, and you think, okay, what is it that, say, school students in the 8th grade want, right? You come up with the problem, then you think that how do I solve it? You come up with a product, and you talk about its features, and then you come up with a potential business model as well. That, okay, what will we do, how will we position ourselves, and how are we going to get funding for it? So that was the concept or the business plan stage where you essentially develop an idea. Okay, what do customers want? What am I going to bring to the table? And who is going to fund me? How is it going to work? The economics of it. The second step was product development, as you see in this chart, right? You start making the product, you hire engineers, right? And now you stop talking and just start working, right? Everybody is working on a particular uh, aspect or a feature of the product, and you're focusing on that release date that you want to ship out to customers. At the same time, marketing is working, right? You have hired salespeople and you're trying to make MRDs, which are marketing requirement documents. There's a VP of sales, and you're focusing on the next step, which is alpha test, where you'll try to you know introduce the product to friends and family, or a small group of people who might be excited enough to pay you for your first release. And then you launch the product after some feedback from those customers. uh, Mostly they are early adopters, right? And you launch the product and ship to the customers, and yeah, we are there, right? So just think about this and try to think that so many people create so much every day, and there are tons of startups that you've not even heard about. Like, apart from hearing about them in Shark Tank India, they never really reach you, right? Because there's tons of ideas, there's tons of startups. The problem with internet, as I mentioned earlier, is that there's a lot of information overload. Everybody is doing everything somewhere or the other, right? So this idea might not work as well. I feel like even you would have started getting that intuition, right? But now we'll analyze in further blog posts as to why this might be a problem, right? So as I mentioned, this is not a bad model, but one that the sales channel and marketing aspect of things can burn a lot of cash. And for a lot of us, you are indie entrepreneurs, you might not have a lot of capital coming in, and you want to just get started with building something that has a hope, right? So that's a big no for you guys. You can't burn money when you don't earn money, right? So yeah, that's one aspect, and the other one is that this was built for existing companies. This is not for startups, and this was followed till quite some good time, right? So 2010s, mid 2010s, this was still being followed, right? So that's why we have this blog post of 2009 talking about why this model is a pitfall, right? So now this is the blog series that I'm referring to, the Customer Development Manifesto. And yeah, we are going to further talk about the customer development model and its problems. The first problem: where is the customer? In this whole aspect, you fail because you don't even have the concept of a customer as a stage in this product, in this whole model, right? I can't read the word customer here. It's not like we are not factoring in what they want, but it's more like a gate in the process. It's not driving the process, which is a very big problem. Because a lot of people, there's a mom test. There's a theory about mom test, which a lot of you might be aware of. If you ask your mom, okay, mom, how is my dress, or how did I make this project, she'll always say yes. A lot of people have this bias to say, yeah, yes, this is perfect, right? But when it comes to actually buying the product, a lot of people back down. That's the problem, and you need to be aware of it. You need to prepare for it as a pragmatic entrepreneur. So this did not even factor into that. Like, you just assumed on the behalf of customers and you built the product. The second is the focus on the customer ship date. There's so much focus that, oh, we want to launch by May of this year or June of this year, right? And the problem with this, it reinforces the wrong mindset that once you've done the release 1.0 of the product, you've understood what the customer wants, right? That is not the truth, because a lot of times what the customer said, what you understood, there's a disparity between that, right? And then they won't buy the product. And next, what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell something which they don't want, and you've already spent so much resources building the product, you've spent resources marketing it, you've hired people to do that when you don't know how to do it, and you are in a loop as to what to do. You're clueless, right? You're really frustrated on why it's not working out. So the truth that you need to understand is, before the customer first ship, right, you don't even know what the customer wants, right? Your hypotheses or your assumptions that you had could be simply wrong, right? So that's very important to be aware of. At the same time, uh, Now you have all these expenses, you're losing on a sales strategy, etc. The focus is on execution versus learning and discovery. I feel that I covered it a bit, but essentially, yes, that you just focused on execution, be it building the product or selling the product. You didn't even wait to check in. Is it really what the customer wants? Does it make sense for the customer to buy a product? Put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Think that if you had that business, would you buy it? Right? Everybody wants to maximize their revenue or their profits, right? So you need to really unlock the value when you're coming into the market, especially when they're existing players, right? It has to be better for the customer, right? So that's one problem. Then you're not agile enough, you're focusing on the execution. You're outsourcing founder's responsibility, right? The founder just thinks that you can run a survey and find out about the customers. That's not really how it works. The most important job of a founder is empathizing with the customer and understanding what they want and what they'll buy, and what features are saleable before the first customer ship, right? This doesn't mean that you wait till you think that you have made the perfect product. That is exactly opposite of what I'm talking about. It's more about you keep making the product. You build and you build and you build and you keep doing it in cycles. You find out, you get feedback, you incorporate that feedback. It has to be a really fast thing for a startup, right? It's not more like version 1, version 2, version 3 planned in 4 months or 7 months, right? It's a weekly or a daily thing where you are changing stuff daily and trying to find out what works best for your customer. Now, yes, this is exactly what I was talking about. Focusing on a finished product, right? You don't have the resources or the capabilities to focus on a finished product than in an MVP. At the same time, investors focus on the broken model. What we are going to talk about now next is another step of problems that come in, because if you remember, in the product development model, you had a business plan, you got some money to fund all those salaries that you were paying the marketing guys or the tech guys building the product, right? The problem that happens if you don't follow the customer discovery model, or if you just follow this particular model that we saw, think of a product, build it, ship it, right, is that you can't make sales, right? Sales and marketing activities are actually fuzzy because you don't even have a way to measure it, or objectives, because when you're building the product, it's not complete yet, so it's fuzzy. How do you sell it, right? The customer has great expectations, but you are not able to deliver it. So a big problem that a lot of people do is focus on sales on the earlier stages. The earlier stages are more about empathizing, understanding what exactly the customer wants. Once you have nailed that, once you've showed a few demos of it, then you can think of sales as to how we do that, how do we price the product. So yeah, the problem is that you're having this conception that ready or not, here we come. Like, hell with it, I'm going to build the product. That's the problem. Sorry. And what it ends up doing is you're not able to sell it, and then the whole blame game starts, right? Uh, the venture capitalist is looking at, okay, why are we not able to hit these numbers, right? The product launch seems wrong. So the VCs are like, okay, my money is drowning. What is happening to the sales? Sales thinks that, okay, we have a lot of traffic, but we just need to work on conversion. So the pressure comes on marketing. The marketing department tries to cook up a better story to sell it right, but still it is not coming up. That just ends up in culling of positions. The VP of sales dealt, is said to be incompetent. He's fired. Then the VP of marketing is fired. Then they realize, okay, marketing was also not the problem. Sales are still not happening. So it just ends up in a cycle, and the company ends up failing. Right? That's the problem with this model. We already know what the right model is, but before that, we're going to talk about what is another problem with this model. Is it's assuming that all types of companies are the same, which is not the truth, because you have something called as market types, right? If you're in an existing market, you know your customers, right? If today, say, Colgate is entering the market after Pepsodent, they already know, right, what kind of customer would use their product, even though they might have separate different segments that buy their products, but at the same time, they pretty much know the market. For them, this model works perfectly. They don't need to worry that. If you are one of those cases, go ahead. Like the product development model is great. But for existing startups, this doesn't really work well. So in this blog post, it talks about PDAs, which was personal digital assistants. These are pre the phone era. This is before the phone era where you had handheld devices. And we see stories of Donna Dubinsky in two scenarios. One where she was in an existing market, and one where she was in a new market where nobody knew about PDS. So this is about 1996 when nobody knew about PDS. Her job was more about understanding what is the type of user who wants this product and what is their workflow, right? If at that time she would focus on technical features and okay, this is how efficient it is, that doesn't work because the customer doesn't even know your product. He's never seen it before. They've never seen it before. How do you expect them to shell out money to buy it? At the same time, you'll see 3 years later, she was in a different company when she had already established the PDA market. There, it was simply about hiring a good VP of sales. The target was in 10, 12 months, they want to win 10% of the market. And they exactly did it, right? After 12 months, their revenue was $170 million following the product development model, right? This is purely because it was an existing market, right? The company was handspring and their customers knew what the product was. So they didn't have to go through the effort of trying to recognize who's going to buy their products, right? The next part of the video I've covered in another section, and I'll stitch that here. Uh, that's it. Thank you. I'll just give a brief summary of the customer development model, where this is said to solve problems of product development, right? Whenever you build a product, what are the problems? So customer discovery is the first step of it, and then you go about ahead in the second step, which is called as customer validation. And next is the creation of the customer, and then we go to company building. So this is a very scientific method of approaching things, as I said earlier. And the first part, customer discovery, it is essentially about making a hypothesis, which is just an assumption in fancy words. And it is to understand the true problems of the customer. So it's very important to follow this so that you don't become, say, you don't get a founder bias that we see in a lot of products where, if you're coming from an engineering background or say whatever background, then you come up with a lot of biases and you really forget what your customer might be using it as. And coming from the tech background, I've seen that happen in a lot of hackathons because we are engineers and we think from the build mindset, right? Build, 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 build. And we'll just think feature first, right? And we'll not think of the problems that might come up. So with customer discovery, we are essentially trying to build a kind of assumption and set it up, right? And understand truly what the customer wants, right? So for that, we go through one of the steps in customer discovery is secondary research. So there are two types of research. One is primary and one is secondary. Primary involves when you say take a direct interview of a person directly, right? And secondary research is a bit more recommended for people like us who are trying to build companies at this stage of time because secondary research means going through all the available documents that you have. So it assumes that even though you might think that we're trying to organize the way of building a startup, it's not like a formula. It's not saying that it's like a, let's say, case study competition, right? It has the provision that you will screw up multiple times before you get it right. And this is unlike those business school things that you might do where everything happens in a linear fashion. So if you take a look at it, customer discovery and validation are in kind of a loop. So the two aspects of it are being that you need to test your hypotheses, and validation is actually a checkpoint. Something that I've highlighted in over here is that what you need to do is you need to have an understanding of what the customer wants, like what is the product that they want, and then a roadmap of how we can sell it, right? These are the two important things, which is obvious if you think about it, right? And if we do the whole discovery process, we find out a product that people want to buy, but while trying to validate it, you are not able to sell it, right? Then you have to go back and figure out what is something that, what is something that a customer might consider, or it might be a priority for them to pay for it, right? So that's why it's a loop. So, and they assume that at least once or twice, there's no startup that is perfect, and we'll go through this process at least once or twice, where you do something, you have a hypothesis, you test it out, and then in validation you find out, oh crap, this doesn't work, right? So that is something that might happen. And then the blog also talks about customer validation and how it's low burn by design. It's made for people with lesser resources. Uh, like a lot of us might not have enough capital, right? Or might not have VC funding at the start of the day, start of when you're starting to build. So the processes that are involved in customer development are very low cash burn rate until you can find paying customers, right? And it talks about how a lot of companies say this, that when they get funding, they're like, okay, so we have this money, we'll probably just as a customer acquisition cost, you'll just give out freebies and then you'll make it up later. But that really increases the timeline of their profitability, and it rarely happens, right? That's what this talks about. So we also talk about how at the start of building, the non-product development teams, so something like sales, marketing, right? Uh, is not really, we don't have a construct for it at this stage, because right now we are at the idea stage and we're building a product and what is required, right? So these are kind of, say, non-essential teams until we have a proof in hand, or a tested sales roadmap or valid purchase orders that this is worth building. So that's why it's also low burn by design. So hi folks, I'm back, and thanks for staying till the end of the video. Now I'll just give you a preview of what's the second video, the follow-up to the build series. The episode 2 of this is going to be about. And yeah, I'm open to feedback on it, as to if this is exactly what I want, what you folks want. So the next video is about how to lean startup, right? We talked briefly about the customer development model in the latter part of the video, but I want you to look at it from a deeper aspect as well. So the next video is going to be a long one where I talk about customer discovery. And it's essentially, I've tried to compress it's going to be a long video, around an hour or so. And the reason why it's so long and I want you to stick through it is I've tried to compress my learnings from a 3 month cohort that I was a part of into that 1 hour. So even though it might seem quite of a time commitment to give, but I feel that it might be worth it, right? And you'll get a gist of the lean startup ideology and the organizational framework behind building. And the third video in the build series will be about how do we take the first step to build it the right way, right? So the first one was about what not to do. The second one is about what to do in depth. And the third one is going to be about, it's a demo, right? On how to do it. So again, it might be a longer video, as I'll just go free. I'll just go freehand at it. So you'll just see me in action researching on a particular topic, and you'll see what's the first step, right? So that's the plan. Um, and just let me know if that's what you appreciate. The future videos I'll try to plan out, but for these first three videos, that's a plan. Thank you for staying tuned to this channel, and again, a subscribe would be great. Spread the word around. I'm trying to build my personal brand here. So thank you.